further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Tony Bamber. Thanks, Tom.
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for inviting me back to speak again. You do me a real honour, and I'll explain at the end of this little talk why I believe it is a genuine honour. Now tonight, I thought I'd talk about the dominant ideology. Now every society that's ever existed has had a dominant ideology. In fact, it's essential enough for society to work. And if you want to get on in society, you must adopt, or at least pretend to adopt, the dominant ideology. In this country, we could call the dominant ideology multiculturalism, globalism, liberalism, capitalism, Zionism, call it what you like, but there is one. And it's very strictly enforced. If you want to get on at all, even if you want to be low level in the regime's organisation, a teacher or a policeman, you have to adopt, or at least pretend to adopt, the dominant ideology. Now, to explore the dominant ideology, I thought what I'd do, I thought I'd compare it with the reality. And I thought I'd split it into two sections. First, let's talk about the economic ideology, and then talk about the social political ideology. And they really interlock, they're really one, but it might be helpful if we split it into two. So what I'll be doing is, I'll be looking at the ideology, comparing it with the reality. Looking at the political theory, comparing it with the political practice, looking at the propaganda, and looking at the truth. Now I know there's a difference between ideology, political theory, and propaganda, but for purposes tonight we could lump them together. So the economic ideology. Well, the economic ideology is capitalism, but it's globalist capitalism. Prior to the war was capitalism within the nation, but now we've got global capitalism. Now for those unaware of the basics of capitalism, the ideology of capitalism, the theory of capitalism, capitalism is a belief that the free market is the best method to supply people with the goods and services they require. And it works something like this, or in theory it's supposed to work something like this. An entrepreneur, a rich person, will see a demand in the market that something needs supplying, whether it's for bread or a motor car or whatever. And he will think, oh, I could make money there, so he will invest in a facility, a factory or a farm to produce this good that it can meet the demand with. Now, if he's seen to be making a lot of profits from supplying this demand, another entrepreneur will look at it and think, oh, I can chisel in on him, and he will invest in a factory, farm or some sort of facility to produce the same goods. And the two suppliers will then start competing with one another to supply the market, and this competition will force them to lower the prices and force them to produce efficiently. So in theory, the free market will produce the goods that people want and in an efficient manner. But what is essential for the market to work is that there have to be no barriers for trade. There has to be the free movement of capital, labour, goods and services. Now, to give you an example how that would work on the global scale, imagine in Belgium that there is a shortage of labour, so the employers will then be seeking the people to come and work for them, and they'll bid the wages up, so the people in Belgium will get high wages. If in Poland there is an excess of labour, employers won't have to pay very much because they can soon replace the workers, so wages will be low. And in a free market, what will happen? Labour will move from the low-paid area of Poland to the high-paid area of Belgium. But there must be no barriers, no restrictions on the movement of people. Another example would be, say, if in Nigeria there are mineral resources but nobody's got the money to invest in a mine to extract these resources. A free market would allow some Russian with loads of money to come in, build a mine, extract the resources and sell them. But there must be no restrictions on who can invest where or who can buy where. So the point is, the ideology, the theory is, there must be a free movement of capital, labour, goods and services without any restrictions, and it's the job of the politicians to remove all these barriers to trade. Well, that is the economic ideology. That is the economic theory. That is the economic practice. Very basics of it anyway. Well, what's the truth? What is the reality? Well, in order to illustrate what I believe is the truth, I'd like to draw on an example from an episode of a popular TV series. A lot of you might have seen it, The Sopranos it was called, and it was about a mafia family in Jersey, New York. And in this particular episode, it was built around the story of this man who had built up a sports superstore. And this superstore had many floors, and it sold everything from mountain bikes to camping equipment, from baseball hats to footballs, everything you could imagine. It had taken him years to build this up, and it had made him quite a wealthy man. Anyway, he fell in with the mob, and he enjoyed rubbing shoulders with the good fellas, and he started playing cards with them in smoky backfilled rooms, high stakes poker. And of course, the inevitable happened. He got in massive debt to the mob. So one day Tony Soprano, who was the godfather of the mob, came to him with all his IOUs, and he said, I need paying for these now. And the chap said, I'm sorry Tony, I haven't got that sort of money. And he says, well look, I'm no point being silly about this. He said, just sign over your superstore and we'll call it quits. And of course he had to, so he signed over the superstore. And the mob then moved into the superstore. And what they did, they immediately started paying themselves massive wages. They borrowed money from wherever they could, whatever banks had lent them money, credit cards, whatever. They stopped paying the taxes, they stopped paying their employees, they ordered goods from every supplier they could think of, got them in, sold them at a loss out the back door, pocketed the back money, ordered company cars, business trips to Florida, and in a very short, they just plundered this facility. And of course, in a very short space of time, the thing went bust. And what they had done through short-termism, through just thinking of themselves, thinking what they could get in their back pockets, they completely smashed a facility which was providing goods to the local community, providing a service, providing employment to a number of people, not just in the store but in the supplier's company, paying taxes to the council, etc., etc. And it was part of the whole system, but they just smashed it through their own greed, thinking of nothing but themselves. Now I believe this is exactly what's happened in this country, but with our leaders. When I was a young man, we had a highly skilled workforce, a hard-working workforce. We used to make everything from liners to linoleum, from tanks to toys, from cheese to chairs. Everything you could imagine, our people made with our own hands, and we worked hard at making them. But because of those in power have thought up every possible scam or wheeze they possibly could to draw money out without any thought for the consequences or the long-term consequences, just so that they could have a good time, whether it's paying themselves excessive wages, whether it's banks lending money to people they know couldn't pay it back, but in the short term it would mean the books look good and they could then claim higher wages, fixing bank lending rates. I've just heard recently they've been fixing the market in energy and gas so they could charge more money. Every little scheme and scam you could think of, our leaders have been implementing in order so that they, the people at the top, could have an extremely luxurious life. And of course what they've done is they've trashed our economy, and we've reached the buffers and payday's coming around. And things are not going to just jump back because of austerity measures. People think that somehow the free market, this is what they say, the ideology, is what they say, it'll come back. Well, the companies, businesses, take years of care and love and attention to build up. And they don't just come back in a minute. The ideology has nothing at all to do with the reality. The economic theory has nothing to do with the economic practice. The economic propaganda has nothing to do with the economic truth. There's a massive gap between the two. Now, to move on to the social theory, the social ideology. Well, the social ideology interlocks with the economic ideology. It's also on a global scale. Our post-war leaders said, oh, well, we've had this terrible war and we really need to do things differently now. And what we're going to do, we're going to create a world where everybody is equal, regardless of sexuality or gender or culture or religion or ethnicity or ability or disability or age, anything at all. It's all going to be, everybody's going to be equal, and we're going to judge people according to their inner character. And we're going to achieve this by outlawing discrimination. There'll be no such thing as discrimination. Has been the cause of every injustice you can imagine, and we're going to outlaw it, and we're going to stamp on anybody who shows any discrimination whatsoever. And on top of this, we have the idea that justice will be brought about by the imposition of human rights. We will have our democratically elected representatives who are wise and considerate and responsible people will sit up there and decide what human rights people deserve, and then they will ensure that these are given to them, whether it's the right to asylum or the right to a house or the right to a married life, and they will ensure that everybody gets these human rights. Everybody on the planet, not just in this country, the whole planet. And this wonderful utopia will be social justice, and we'll all be so grateful, we'll all live in peace and harmony, and it will be wonderful. Well, that's the ideology. The reality is very different. That's the political theory, but the political practice is entirely different. The reality is they've just allowed millions of foreigners to swarm onto our lands, each forming into all thousands of different little groups and colonies. Each of these colonies are jostling with each other for a piece of the communal pie, and insisting that their culture is respected, that their view of history is the one that is taught in schools, that they're allowed to worship in their churches and mosques and whatever it is. And what they have brought is utter chaos to our country. Now, I can't remember where I heard it, I think it was on the internet, but a little parable which I think explains the situation very well. And this parable is about this couple who have been extremely fortunate in life. They inherited a very large house, they've got married, they've got a large number of kids who are all healthy and everything's nice, and they live a well-ordered life. Very lucky. Anyway, one day, this couple have been out on the town, they've been having a party, and they're walking home, and they walk past the railway arches, and under the railway arches are these poor starving kids dressed in rags, some of them have got no shoes on, and they look at them and they think, oh my goodness me, these poor children, look how they're suffering. It's so unfair that these children have so little, and our children have so much. That's just not fair. We must invite them back, and we must make everybody equal, and everybody will have the same, and we'll share everything out. So they invite these kids back to the family home, and of course once they start, the first ones, they just keep coming every day, more and more little kids. As the word gets around, you can go back to this house and you get really fed, really nice, all for now, it's really good. So they keep coming, and of course all the kids, some of them don't want to go to school, some of them bring diseases, some of them don't want to go to sleep at night, some go out on the town. It's all a bit chaotic, and it's getting worse and worse, and the money's running out, and it's very difficult to keep them. But the point of this little story is not just about the feckless, stupid, irresponsible, do-gooding nature of this couple. The real condemnation of this couple comes when the story goes on to tell how the kids come to the parents and say, their own kids come to the parents and say, these newcomers are beating us up, they're robbing from us, they're sexually and abusing our little Mary. And the parents don't want to know. So they're lying, that can't be true, that can't be true. And they just don't want to know. Now, what kind of parents are those? What kind of people are those? Now, when I was preparing this little talk, I was trying to think of a word or words that I could use to describe these people. And feckless and irresponsible don't really cover it. The hypocrisy of these people who could care so much for these kiddies and then not care a little bit about their own. And there's something twisted and warped about these people, something deeply flawed. And of course, this is exactly the case with our leaders. We've had the child grooming issue. For years, this party and our chairman was going to them and saying, look, these people are raping our kids. They didn't want to know. And what kind of people are these, our leaders, who care so much about human rights, who are always on, oh, and how they feel for the Africans, oh, they were slaves, oh, terrible, terrible. And those Asians, oh, we colonised them, how they must have suffered, and we called them names, God. And the Jews, don't bring up the Jews, what happened to those poor people? We must feel so, and we have a Holocaust day, and oh, they bleed for all these foreigners. But their own people, they don't want to bloody know. They don't care about our suffering. And it's not just a child grooming issue. I'm going to take this as an opportunity now to, and they have abused us on a whole range of things, and I'm only bringing up two here, the child grooming. But one I want to bring up is the heroin trade. Now, the heroin trade, to me, is worse than the slave trade. It's more abusive, more exploitative, and more lethal. It completely destroys people. Now, I know many people blame the addicts for the case rate, but many of these addicts are only 12 and 13 when they get hooked on the thing. But even if you don't care about the addicts, what about the addicts' families? What about the communities where they're all stealing money from? Do you know that in 2009, that's the latest figures I can get, out of the 140,000 people, prisoners, criminals who served custodial sentences in this country, 60,000, that's nearly half, had to be put on methadone to stabilise their heroin addiction. We have between 300 and 400,000 addicts in this country, all who can't work at all because they're either slobbed out, they're totally incapable of work. They have the kids taken off them because they're incapable of bringing up kids. They cost everybody here in a fortune, but what they do, they're much more efficient than slaves for the Muslims. They're much more efficient because you don't have to say, look, go out and pick this cotton. You don't have to provide them with houses and food. You just have to get them hooked on heroin, and they will be off getting money every day to bring back to you. They're like little cash fountains. These are real money earners. And it is for the Muslims. 90% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan. 100% of the heroin in this country comes from Afghanistan. And our leaders, these people who care so much about compassionate conservatism, hug a hoodie and all the rest of it, they could easily stop this, not just in this country. In the whole world, there's between 13 and 20 million people hooked on heroin, so it's a worldwide massive problem. They could more or less completely stop that suffering. They've got drone aircraft that they could convert for crop spraying. They could easily destroy the crops with little damage. There's modern herbicides that they could use that would damage the soil hardly at all. It would hardly do any damage to the local population. It would be easy for them to destroy those poppy fields, and yet they don't. They say they don't because they don't want to deprive the Afghans of the means of earning a living. Because, I mean, they could grow carrots. That is obviously a lie, because the money from the heroin trade buys all the weapons and guns that are destroying our lads. Most experts agree that the reason they don't destroy the poppy fields is because of this, because of backhanders. The heroin trade is worth $65 billion a year. There's enough money to corrupt the entire American administration a number of times. And most experts believe that that is why the poppy fields are not destroyed. There's American soldiers walking through the poppy fields. They've even gone so far now where they're compensating Afghan farmers if the American soldiers damage the poppy fields. That's the lunacy we've got to. And this trade is causing misery galore around the world. And to me, that shows the moral standing of our leaders. What sort of people they are. Well, that's my little rant over, you'll be glad to know. So the point, but I don't want to be too cynical about people. I don't want you to think that I think everybody's terrible, because I certainly don't. I think there are good people in this world, and many of them are in the BNP. I respect the people of the BNP. The reason why I've been a member of the BNP for 12 years is because I really, really do admire the people in the BNP. They go out, they're not earning any money. They just get pain and suffering mostly for being in the BNP. It's mostly agony they get. And yet, out of a sense of righteousness, they're actually out there defending our kids, doing the job that our leaders should be doing, and being punished for it. And we are being punished for it. And I'd like to read, just to show how we're persecuted, an email that Councillor Parker got today, to show the sort of thing that we have to put up with. Dear Councillor Brian Parker, you're not very dear at all. I am an extreme sufferer of Asperger's syndrome. I therefore suffer also from unending obsessiveness, a lustful personality for pretty women, as well as a self-indulgence in all my political beliefs, and a low latent inhibition. Once in a blue moon, I check out the Hope Not Hate website. I am picking on you without loss of generality, purely because of your abhorrent political party. I want your political party out of existence. You work for the British Nazi Onal Party, and I will not hesitate to wish violence upon you and your home. I am currently indulging in satanic prayer. I am at present praying for you to be petrol bombed. You are a fascist, Nazistic councillor, Brian Parker, are more dangerous than Anders Breivik. You are off the scale. Please do Pendle and Britain a favour and burn in hell. Now I know Brian Parker. I know Brian Parker works endlessly for the people of his ward. He's a good councillor, he's a good man. And this is the sort of thing he gets. I was at a meeting at Manchester the other week, and the conversation got round to talking about how people had suffered as a consequence of being in the BNP there. And the sort of things people had suffered was amazing. People had lost their jobs. One person had lost a contract because he worked for a Jew in Manchester, and when he found out he was in the BNP, he lost his contract, and loads of other things. The people in the BNP do good, and we do good because this whole grooming issue has come to the fore because of the work of the BNP and our chairman. So it is working. We do a good job, but we get no thanks for it. We're persecuted for it, but people do it just out of a sense of moral responsibility, which to me fulfills my belief or restores my belief in human nature. And that is why I said at the beginning, I say why I was honoured to come and talk at this meeting. I do feel honoured, and I feel honoured because I'm asked to speak at a meeting of people that I truly respect. So thank you very much for having me.